what are some actions that you can take that are small, that could build on some other actions to get you in the rhythm of self-prioritization? Because you want to reinforce that message that it's okay to do that so that you can be accessible for the work.
Hello, and welcome to Revolutionary Leadership, the bi-weekly podcast that shines a spotlight on the visionary leadership approaches Black women have cultivated for generations, yet are too often overlooked. I'm Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, a cultural architect, racial equity strategist, and scholar of organizational change. For more than 20 years, I have helped leaders, organizations, and communities reimagine what's possible when equity and authenticity guide the way. Each episode, we'll dive deep into conversations that illuminate how Black women integrate community care, radical self-prioritization, and collective capacity building into transformative leadership practices. Together, we'll expand what leadership can look like and what liberation through leadership truly means. Because this is where Black women's stories become tomorrow's blueprints. Welcome back to Revolutionary Leadership, where Black women's stories become tomorrow's blueprint. This episode explores leadership's most overlooked strategy, the power of radical self-prioritization. Not self-care as indulgence, but self-care as clinically necessary. Not rest as a reward, but rest as a strategic infrastructure. Not boundaries as limitation, but boundaries as brilliance. What if the most radical act for Black women's leadership is refusing depletion as a strategy, refusing to prove worth through exhaustion, refusing to demonstrate commitment through self-sacrifice? This episode is all about that refusal and what becomes possible when self-care becomes a boundary, not a reward, and peace becomes the foundation of power, not its absence. We're joined by a leader whose life's work proves that internal stability is not a luxury for leaders. It's the foundation of meaningful change. Our guest is Dr. Zakiya Newland, a clinical social worker, educator, thought leader, and mental health advocate whose career has combined scholarship, community practice, and justice-centered leadership for more than 3 decades. Dr. Newland began her journey in Harlem, serving as a clinical social worker, community liaison, program developer, and mental health clinic administrator. Today, she is a full professor and chairperson of the Department of Social Work at Molloy University and is the founder of LZN Consulting LLC, where she provides specialized training and consultation. Her leadership also extends into the community as convener of Black Family Summit Incorporated and president of Nassau, Suffolk Association of Black Social Workers. Across her roles, she brings a deep commitment to empowerment, equity, and mental health integration, making her a guiding voice on how Black leaders can protect their peace, advocate for justice, and prioritize care without sacrificing purpose. Sister Zakiya, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. This is a phenomenal platform. I look forward to our dialogue and its influence and impact as you continue this important work.
Oh, thank you so much. But before we go any further, I want to ask you, what are you drinking as we warm up to have this conversation?
So I had it already. I'm a tea person. So it was ginger turmeric tea with
Oh,
a little bit
right.
of honey. Yes, I do have some water as we go through the conversation for my hydration goals.
Hydration is important, and I love some ginger turmeric tea. This morning, I am sipping on apple pie chai.
Oh,
I know, I found it in my cupboard. I was just like, all right, apple pie chai.
yes. All
All right.
right.
Let's start with some rapid fire questions so we can all get a chance to know you. What's one boundary that changed your quality of life as a leader?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think for me, I use the idea of my why before the what as a boundary. It's so easy to get caught up in the what of a thing, right? What you're being asked to do, a particular task. But I often have to stop and really consider the why. Is it essential? Is it necessary in this moment? So thinking about my why before the what really helps me to operate with intention.
Ooh, I'm going to have to employ that. The why before the what. I love it. What's a self care myth you wish Black women would retire immediately, like right now?
Oh, like right now? So this idea, I think initially self-care, people started thinking about going to get their manicures, their pedicures, and
Hmm.
those are things that people would routinely do. So
Right.
if it's something that you routinely do, guess what? It's really not a self-care strategy. I mean, I would even say it may just be your routine care, but not necessarily self-care that has a deeper meaning. So yeah, please, please retire that myth of going to your regular, especially if it's related to our physical appearance. Those types of
Right.
appointments is your self-care routine.
I love it. I love it. So we are not talking about headed to the spa for manis and pedis and a massage, even if you do that on a regular basis as a part of just keeping you up. All right. So what's your go-to grounding or restoration practice during high pressure seasons?
Yeah, so I think it's more so along the lines of restoration after those high pressure moments, whether it's a season or the flow of the work or the rhythm. So I love, love, love solo driving. I don't care if it's, just like if I'm running errands, but just solo driving with my music to meet my mood. So I might need inspirational music.
Yes.
I might need worship music. I might need old school hip hop. I might need a nice R&B, but I have to be conscious of what that mood is, match it with some music, and then just be in the car by myself.
Oh, I love it. I love alone time in the car because for me, that's when I can play the music that my 8-year-olds cannot listen to. And I am a hip hop from the 90s. So
There
you
you go.
know,
I take it back one more decade. I remember I'm from the Bronx originally, right? So I remember when
yes,
those jams in the park were happening. So I have a,
yes,
a long-term relationship with hip hop.
I love it. I love it. Now, let's go deeper into your journey with this very important work that you've been carrying for decades.
Yeah, so I met social work at the undergraduate level, right? A lot of people go into this profession and they get their MSW and they could have had other undergraduate degrees. But in high school, I learned about the profession of social work, just that it was a place where at that point I thought, whoa, people will tell you your business. I was a nosy teenager. I was also
Right up your alley, right?
Right. I was a nosy teenager. I thought I gave good advice to, girlfriends for the most part, but I learned more about the profession. But interestingly enough, my parents, who weren't college educated, and I grew up in
Hmm.
public housing in the Bronx, they were involved in the community.
Hmm.
So we did like my father was the initial driving force behind a tenant patrol where the
Okay.
tenants in the building would come together to patrol the buildings for safety. He was a community father. If he took me to the park, he took the other kids to the park.
Hmm.
So I later found out that I was being exposed to things that social work as a profession is concerned about. So I met the profession early and have consistently stayed. So all my degrees are in social work, and the love affair that I have with this profession is real and true and consistent. So it's taken different paths, different roles. Leadership was always a component of things, not just because of social work. In high school, I was like in student government. In college,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
did I pledged to Delta Sigma Theta in college at Morgan State, and all of our fraternities and sororities had a council, and I was the president of that council
All
in
right.
college. So leadership has just
It's
been
it's just
around
been
me.
you. It's just been who you are.
Yeah,
Wonderful, wonderful.
yeah.
So, Sister Zakiya, in our prep conversation, you said something that's still sitting with me. You mentioned that you can tell when you're getting depleted because the sass comes out. When
I knew
you're
you was gonna
rolling your
work that in.
eyes and at text messages, getting a little salty in your responses, that's such an honest signal. Walk me through how you came to recognize that in yourself. And more importantly, what you do when you notice it.
Yeah, so it was so funny when we had that conversation, and I framed it as the sass coming out because I started noticing that people were asking questions of me that were routine. It was like how they know me. If they know that I am a resource person, they would be
Yes.
reaching out saying, "Hey, can you offer a recommendation for this? Or have you checked this out? Have you vetted it?" And there's an honor in them being able to do that. And I often want to receive it that way
Yes.
because I know that's the intention. However, catch me on a day where that depletion is hitting me hard. It
Yes.
can look like, "What they texting me for? What they don't know nobody else? They could
Right.
Google it." Like that kind of thing. And that's sassy and that's inappropriate in some ways. And so it's
And
honest.
it's human,
It
and
is
it is
human.
so human, right? We can't lose the fact that, hey, sometimes I just need some time.
Yeah, and kinda creating that space. So, I'll respond like, "Hey, give me a little time to get back to you on this,"
Mhm.
or I'll think of ways to direct them maybe to some of the directories that I use if they're looking for, specific recommendations, or to just tell them I need a little time to give them what it is that
Yeah,
they're asking me for. But
I
yeah,
love it.
that sass is an internal dialogue, but it is honest. But what it signals to me is, "All right, girl, get yourself together,"
Mhm, mhm.
What's going on? Why are you tired? Where are you overworked? What
Yeah,
might you need to pull back on and create more space so that you could operate in this natural way of operating without the sass?
I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. And I think what's important here is that you have clinical training and lived experience, so you're not just recommending self-care to other people, you're navigating this yourself as someone who serves in multiple leadership roles. So, talk to me about the shift from viewing self-care as something you should do to viewing it as clinically necessary. And what does that reframe actually mean?
Yeah, so I think the continuum that we've seen self-care play out on has started with some of those going for your manicure, your pedicure,
Mhm,
spa
mhm,
treatment. But the deeper piece of it is thinking reflectively about how you can use certain activities as a strategy to be restorative if you
mhm.
need that. But it starts from a level of awareness, right? So
Ah,
really being able to, yeah, I'm going to do these things, but again, that why before the
mhm,
what,
mhm,
and really thinking about what identified needs you can say for yourself, but then how you're meeting those needs through some of these activities. So the journey then, in my opinion, for most people should go from the things that you might routinely do to understanding your need to do those things. So the need to get a manicure and pedicure, okay, we don't want you out here in the summertime with your feet looking a certain way. We
right.
get,
Like
right?
you
We
be kicking
understand,
flower, right.
we get the vanity behind that, what you need to do. That's all well and good.
That's right, right.
But some of the other things, like my need for a solo drive, comes from me feeling a little overwhelmed or me feeling that I've given myself to, so many other causes or people
Mhm.
without needing to take some time to just be with me in the fullness of my interests for music, and especially if it's a sunny day and I can put on my prescription sunglasses. It's just joy. It's
Yes,
really
yes.
just thinking about what kind of activities invite the presence of joy. That I think is a bit of a clinical reframe because it recognizes that something is off
Mhm,
or whatever the context is for it being off,
mhm.
but how do you get back to something that you value? I value
Ah,
joy, so I got to get
yes.
back to that.
You gotta get back to that and find as many moments of it as you can because we are going to need it on this stretch right here. So
Correct.
this connects to something you shared with me, the 4 A's framework. So you talked about awareness, but the 4 A's framework, acknowledge, awareness, action, and acceptance. Can you break that down for us? How do you use this with Black women leaders?
Yeah, so interesting enough, this came to me as I was doing clinical social work. I had
Mhm,
a therapy practice for several years up until maybe just a few years ago, where I shifted and started doing more consultation training and macro oriented practice. And it came because a lot of times as people are coming in for therapy, and particularly I noticed this with women, Black women, is that they were struggling to name certain things.
mm.
And we had to get to the point where we just called the thing the thing.
Call the thing, yes.
So the acknowledgement of whatever it is, and it's a journey to get there. It's a healing journey for many people, especially if it's influenced by trauma, lived
Mhm.
experience,
Mhm.
things happening in society, things happening in relationships. So the important to get to the acknowledgement, and that's a celebratory moment. Okay, we've been able to name something. So now what awareness is coming as a result of acknowledging it? What are some of the context, some of the how, why, what are the patterns around this dynamic playing out so that people can get that depth of understanding, because what builds on that understanding is the actions. All right, well, what you gonna do about it? Let's see about some of the behaviorally oriented strategies for change. And then ultimately getting to a place where there can be acceptance. And sometimes that's very difficult because of whatever the dynamic may be, but also recognizing that sometimes you have to make choices based on what you're accepting or recognizing what you're not going to accept. And that leads to a different set of choices. So it became this way to walk people through a healing process where it wasn't just about coming in for anxiety, coming in for depression, coming in because it was a phase of life shift, but really being able to move those concepts into something that was very relatable and practical for the person that was experiencing it.
So let's apply this right now to a real scenario. And I want to walk you through a client example.
Okay.
So let's say a Black woman leader comes to you. She's a VP at a Fortune 500 company. She's leading a major initiative. She's being called on constantly by her team, her leadership, her family. And she says to you, Dr. Newland, I know I need to set some boundaries and take care of myself, but taking time for rest feels selfish when so many people are counting on me. My team is counting on me to deliver this project. My leadership is counting on me to be present for our ERG work. My family is counting on me to show up. How can I possibly prioritize myself right now? Walk us through how you would guide her using the 4 A's with that specific challenge.
Sure. So I think it's important to hear from her what she is struggling with the most. And what I heard from your example is this idea of doing for myself is difficult because so much of me is required in other places, in
Right.
family, with the project, the leadership, the team, all of the things. Being able to help the person feel a sense of affirmation from the fact that, sis, you are in the role of VP.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that got you to this place in terms of your background, your expertise, but there's also a part of you that has to be constantly refreshed. So it's about preparation. You have to be prepared to engage all the different responsibilities that you have to engage. And what might that look like if you were to first recognize that being engaged in some of your own self prioritization helps everybody else?
Mm,
So let's say that's the acknowledgement. Because I mean, if you think about it,
that's the acknowledgement. Yes.
when we show up healthy, happy, and whole, everybody gonna be all right.
Everybody's going to be all right, including us, which
Yes,
is
yes.
important. Yes.
Yeah. So then, as the gateway, the same way she was the leader to bring the project to the team, or she's going to facilitate a process for the project to go from beginning to middle to end,
Hmm.
she's coming to that work a certain way. So acknowledging that it's fine to prioritize that, to recognize that, to work that into the plan.
Hmm.
So that's the acknowledgement. Then the awareness would be, what are some of the reasons? What are some of the messages? Whose voice is that? Is that society's voice about Black women and what we should be doing? Is that someone in your family that said things? And I'll just pause there because I know my mother used to say, you want something done right, do it yourself.
Yes.
Huh? I mean, I got it. But when I had to unpack that thing later on, I would take on so much because I didn't have a confidence in somebody else being able to do it effectively, my way, whatever it might be. So that's a message. She had 3 daughters. I'm the youngest of three. For us to be independent. And she was married. She had a whole husband, but still, that was her framework.
Right.
That was her message. And it was just like, no, mommy, I don't think that was the right message for me.
Right. Right.
But I had to, work that through. All right. So back to the scenario. So where is it coming from? What voices does it reflect? And then building some awareness around that and
Hmm.
giving grace where you need to, understanding where you need to, but then also thinking about, all right, let's try some incremental steps in you doing this. Let's look at your scheduling. Let's look at how you're dealing with your meetings, your flow of meetings. Are you taking a lunch break? Are you just sitting and scarfing down something quick? Are you hydrated during the workday? What are some actions that you can take that are small, that could build on some other actions to get you in the rhythm of self-prioritization? Because you want to reinforce that message that it's okay to do that so that you can be accessible for the work. And
Nice.
then the acceptance, I think, looks like more of a consistent pattern of doing it because you realize it's not hurting the process. Hopefully, it's helping.
So I hear you helping with her acknowledgement of what's actually happening. You're VP. That's sometimes the cost of doing the work, but how do you prepare so that you can do that work your best or that you can show up your very best when it's required to do that work? The awareness. So interrogating those personally held scripts with
Hmm.
grace and understanding, some which have been placed by people that love and care about you, right? But just
Sure.
examining what does that mean for me now? The action, piece by piece, is sort of bite sized pieces, not trying to change it all at the same time to build some momentum. And that acceptance is that constant, doing the thing that you are committed to doing, and that's prioritizing self care. This is so powerful because what you're doing is giving her a framework to move through this, not just telling her, you should take care of yourself. There's actually a process here to do that. And here's what I want to emphasize. You just said that it takes time and preparation is key because if you show up depleted, then you don't have the ability to do your very best work. And that's the revolutionary part. We're not talking about bubble baths and spa days. We're talking about clinical interventions, strategic protection, and sustainable power.
Yes, definitely. And I also think the idea of the acceptance piece of it is recognizing that as you do it, there are benefits. There are benefits to you, and really take notice. Take notice of what appears to be different, how people might be responding, how the work is still moving along. Nothing has gone awry in such a way the mission needs to be aborted because you decided to start thinking about yourself a little differently and caring for yourself through your process.
I love it. So let's talk about boundaries because I think many Black women leaders struggle with this. We've been socialized, like you said, as the one that one friend calls, family calls, colleagues calls, the department comes to, the community counts on. You mentioned this in our earlier conversation about the backstory of why the SAS. Say more about being socialized as the one and how that shows up in leadership and
Yeah.
our lives in general.
Yeah, so I mean, the messages come from so many places. So certainly they could come from our family experiences, but we have to look at the role that the media has played and societal beliefs has played, and even our historical truths about the activities, the tasks, the burden even, that's put upon Black women, the expectation to produce, in some cases, you can't, I know someone who says produce without excuse, that this mentality that we have
Yes.
is, that we have to be these doers, these
Mhm,
doers, these doers.
mhm.
And listen, the reality is that there is some truth to that. Right. So we cannot, take it away and say, no, no, we're going to cast that belief down per se. But it's how do you navigate around that? So, yes,
Yes.
the acknowledgement, the knowing. But now what's that navigation looking like? That can be boundaries. That can
Yes.
be recognizing the importance of how you think about boundaries. Because I think
Mhm.
society also sends us messages that they can be, sharp, cutting somebody off. That's a boundary.
Right,
Or you're clapping back on a situation. That's a boundary. Yeah, but that's adding on some other things. That's,
right,
the
right.
sass
Yes.
coming out and staying as opposed to the sass
Permanently
being
as
managed.
a
Yeah.
permanently, right, and it's external, not just, an internal thing that you manage. You also said something profound that we don't allow ourselves to explore the fullness of our needs. What do you mean by that?
I think as it relates to work around self-prioritization and boundaries, the time that we need to spend reflecting and kind of understanding our needs in the moment, right? We can't just necessarily say our needs in general. Sometimes we have to think in this particular moment and then how we respond to that level of awareness. So really thinking about our needs for connection, our needs for community, our needs for understanding, our needs for consideration, grace, peace, you name it. But really thinking about what is this situation that I'm encountering and what do I need as a result of it? Not what do I need to complete it, to be effective in it, but really thinking about my needs. And so I'll give an example. I know for me, a lot of people come to me and okay, so I'll use this in the context of my work at the university. Students, faculty, colleagues, peers with questions because they encounter something that seems off. Hey, is this the practice that we do now? What is your viewpoint on it? Or is this right? Because they're not sure. And sometimes I can get frustrated because it's like, well, yeah, read the manual. You get the same understanding that I have, right?
Right.
I'm not, doing
You're not the
anything
interpreter, right?
right, where there's like a very specialized knowledge that I have,
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
not that. In that case, I have to think about what my need is. And oftentimes it's for me to understand, well, why are you coming to me?
Right.
What about this don't you understand? Especially if it's a student and it's in the syllabus and it's somewhere on a platform. A lot of times they're coming because they second guess themselves, they might have a level of anxiety, they may be unsure, and then I'll give them the information they need, but I'll also try to help them realize that they need to find ways to have assurances outside of just going to somebody else to get information that was available to you in the first place.
Ah, I like that. That is such a great example. I want to highlight something that you mentioned in our prep conversation. You talked about the importance of thinking deeply about our fullness of your experiences, whether that's employment, whether that's volunteer work, contracted work, in order to appreciate and act on your gifts, skills, and overall fabulosity. Now, I love that language, overall fabulosity. Talk to me about that framework. How do you help Black women think strategically about leveraging all of their experiences, not just their paid work, but volunteer leadership, board service, community roles, without compromising themselves?
Yeah, so that's, loaded. And I can remember when I said it, what I was thinking about was some of the more recent experiences I was having and colleagues that I've been in communication with for us to talk about how we have observations of maybe other people, men, be honest, white men specifically, who may be negotiating contracts or roles or other things. And it's like, oh, okay. I see how you're moving, right? And yeah, that makes sense for how you're moving in your career. But the idea that came to me was think of the fullness of, let's say, my experience or any Black women leaders' experience. It's in multiple places. It's not
Right,
just in a job. It's, some of those contracts that you did if you do, your side hustle
right.
even if it's within your job, there could be ways that you served on committees or special projects,
Yes.
or you created an initiative for your institution that they have now kept on going, for a number of years. How do you translate that into your understanding of the skill and updating of your CV? Are you at least
Ah,
keeping a list,
yes,
Because when
yes.
it's time to redo your resume, your CV, your
You don't want to
profile,
go
whatever it
scrambling.
is,
Right.
yeah,
You
keep
don't want to
a
scramble.
list.
Yes,
Keep
yes.
a list, connect to skill. I know for me, I often think about skills, gifts, expertise. And what hit me is I would do things and people would compliment it. And I could receive a compliment. I don't have a problem with that. But in my mind, I would be like, well, why are they making a point of that particular thing? Because it just came so naturally to me.
Yeah.
I didn't even prepare,
Right,
and it
right.
came out, that way. Right. And
It's just what I do.
I'm not saying that, out of ego. I'm just saying it out of fact, right?
Right.
As I thought deeply about this, it was like, that's an evidence of a gifting
Yeah.
that just
Yes, yes.
effortlessly I was able to do this or
That you've been
say
always
that
been
or
doing. Yeah.
yes,
Like
it's
leadership has been in you since you were a young person.
correct.
And so it just comes up because you have praxis. Yeah.
Yes, and definitely seeing that as a gift. So, note those things and,
Yeah.
whether people journal or keep a file at whatever
Mhm.
point they
Mhm.
can, just to note those things so that when it's time to consider this fullness of your experience and how it contributes to that overall fabulosity, you have some reference points. You don't have to go back to your calendar and try to remember these kinds of things. Yeah. So I think honoring the fullness and how it shows up, who knows what you can use it for in the future? It might be a social media post. It might be, something that you
Talking with
do.
friends. Yeah.
Yes, that comes up in natural dialogue. So, yeah, I think that that's critically important, and it comes from thinking deeply.
This is brilliant because what you're demonstrating is that we can think strategically about all of our experiences: paid work, volunteer leadership, community service, and extract lessons, build skills, and position ourselves for what's next. And we don't know what's next, but if you are ready always, then you don't have to get ready. That's
Yes.
sophisticated leadership, and it requires boundaries. You can't leverage your experience if you're so depleted from them that you can't even process sort of what you are learning or even take the time to jot it down, right? You're someone that Black women call when they need mental health support or referrals. You've been that resource for me personally. What patterns do you see? What are Black women leaders telling you when they reach out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it happens on so many different levels. So I think what I'm hearing is a level of struggle around managing it all
Mm,
and sitting with how it's impacting people and people coming wanting to have dialogue and wanting to have a therapeutic encounter to understand that, to unpack it a bit and to progress through it in a way that's not going to cause more damage, because the bottom line is that they're going to keep bleeding, that there's still going to be responsibilities that are placed upon them that they
hmm
want to engage in and want to engage in more fully. And so I think the call for mental health supports is, how do I navigate some of this in a way that's going to allow me to be more of an optimal version of myself?
And you work with the 8 dimensions of wellness framework. So, physical, emotional, social, intellectual, spiritual, occupational, environmental, and financial. And all of those are so interconnected. And you shared that you use this in your mobile health clinic at Molloy. When you're working with Black women leaders, which of these 8 dimensions do you see that are most neglected?
Okay, so I think the framework of it comes from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, and others, who adopt it as well. But I think for Black women leaders, interestingly enough, the emotional is something that comes up often. I think social pretty much is okay, but financial for some,
Yes,
if they're vulnerable enough, honest enough with themselves, they may not be where they think they should be, even though they're making good salaries, in terms of savings, in terms of investments, wealth creation, those kinds of things.
sure.
And so having information on, with a financial advisor. I mean, myself, I had a relationship just maybe the last couple of years with a financial advisor. And I'm going to tell you, I don't mind saying this honestly, after my first consultation with her, our first full meeting, I got off the phone, I think we were on Zoom maybe, and I cried. And
Yeah,
my
hurt your
tears,
feelings, right?
no, no, but it wasn't about hurting my feelings. I felt like, yes, this is help. This is
Yes,
resource.
yes,
This is
yes,
gonna be, really good for me. Right. I
yes.
was overwhelmed with emotion because I was like, this is her area, her gifting. I don't need to figure this out for me. I need to just have the confidence in someone who has expertise, who can help me think through certain options and can present something. This is a resource and I am thankful. And that's what the tears were. So I think, everybody want to try to get their house in order a certain kind of way. And I was just like, yeah, I could do a little more. I could do a little differently. I could learn some things. And I took from that experience, the fact that I was avoiding doing certain things because I didn't have a proficiency at it.
Yeah, that avoidance, right? And asking for help. Just asking for help. Let's talk about resources because I think Black women want support, but don't always know where to go. So you've curated resource lists through Black Family Summit, Black led initiatives, mental health platforms. Why is that curation important? And what community connections over just Google therapist near me?
one, I think ties back into being a social worker, often needing to understand what resources are available. But for Black Family Summit, and that's a collective of national, for the most part, Black professional organizations and other Black-led initiatives, it was so obvious to me that the organizations themselves were resourceful and creating some awareness around that, whether it's the resource page on our website and this list that was curated beginning in 2025. At first, I called it a post inauguration resource list because I thought it was
Because we
important,
needed it. We
yeah,
needed
for
it.
people to know, hey, you could catch a
You're not
healing
alone.
circle here.
Right.
You
Yes.
could get a thought piece from someone's Black brilliance by checking this person out on YouTube or reading this blog. You are on that list for your
I
work.
love it. Thank
Yes.
you.
So
Thank you.
you're welcome. But I think it was important for people to know that they are like-minded individuals and organizations that can provide education, but also provide some affirmation where you can feel seen, heard. Sometimes you need to read something and be like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm experiencing or thinking. And so I love the fact that it is a list of Black-led resources that people can connect to and see themselves in and, share with other people. There are platforms on the website, I believe, for different therapist directories that have been curated. Clinicians of
Nice.
Color is one. I know one of the co-founders of that. And they have gone from just being a directory of clinicians to doing trainings and retreats and all other kinds of services that help pour into the clinicians who are doing this work and that are so needed in our communities and really being responsive to the call for mental health services. Because there are some mental health clinicians that are very concerned about some of these, I'll call them pop-up people on, the internet.
On these internets out here. Yes.
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 That aren't clinically trained by degree or certification, and are saying, now listen, there's a difference between the clinically oriented services like therapy and coaching. There's value in both, depending on what someone might need. But there's a lot of folk coming up talking about what they can coach you through. And you just want to make sure you are checking their backgrounds and have a confidence in their ability to provide what you need.
That's right. I love that, love that, love that. There was one resource that you recommended, a book that you recommend often, Set Boundaries, Find Peace.
Yes. So I'm looking at that now. Set Boundaries, Find Peace is the name of the book. Nedra Glover Tawwab, Tawab, is the author. She's a Black woman and she's a licensed clinical social worker. And what I've done with the book, one, it comes with the workbook also. And
Okay.
so I've used the workbook with some clients to kind of walk through issues. There's a Black woman who takes on a lot of responsibility in her family.
Hmm.
She's married and has two children, but also with her parents. And, she's a professional woman and she was struggling a lot with some boundary issues because it was in the context of family and work.
Yes. Yes.
So how do I really negotiate around what my needs are and set some boundaries? And so we did some work and she really appreciated some of the framework set forth in that book. I think any resource that helps us think a bit more deeply about our needs, again, reiterating that why is so important, but also gives practical strategies. And that's something that I like about that resource.
Beautiful. Before we close, where can people find you, your work? Where can they learn more about Black Family Summit, your consultancy, the resources that you've curated?
Great. So Black Family Summit's website is blackfamilysummit.org. That's all one word. So they could find the history and some of the current operations of the organization. And most importantly, that resource page.
Yes.
It's nice to know our story and how we came into existence, but get over to that resource page so you can see what's there. You'll see the websites for the organizations that are within the collective. Click on their website, learn about what they do, but that curated list is on there as well. And we can refresh the content every so often. So it's going to be a living, active experience with some of that resource information. So myself, my company, LZN Consulting LLC, the website is setupthewin.com.
Ah,
Dot,
okay.
yeah, .com.
Yeah.
So I'll say it again. It's setupthewin.com. And WIN came to me as an acronym for Wellness Innovation by Newland, my last name.
I love it. Love
So,
it.
and it was like, what's the website going to be? LZN? No. So we just did Set Up the Win.
I like
But
it.
on social media, on Instagram, the number two, Educate to Elevate CS, because that's the name of my first business, Educate to Elevate Consultation Services. So
Okay.
it's Educate to Elevate CS. And then LinkedIn is my full name, Lisa Zakiya Newland.
Wonderful. We will have all of those links so people can get to you quickly in the show notes. And so this conversation reminds us that leadership rooted in exhaustion is not leadership, it's survival. And we deserve more than survival. Sister Zakiya offered us a blueprint for leadership that honors our humanity, protects our peace, and amplifies our impact. Here's what I'm taking from this conversation: the 4 A's: acknowledgement, awareness, action, acceptance, give you a framework for moving from depletion to restoration. We walk through exactly how to apply this when you're feeling guilty about setting boundaries. The 8 dimensions of wellness show us how well-being isn't one thing. It's integrated across physical, emotional, social, intellectual, spiritual, occupational, environmental, and financial dimensions. You can't just fix one of these areas and expect to thrive. Boundaries are brilliant. So setting clear boundaries allows you to serve powerfully without depleting yourself. It's not selfish, it is strategic. And think deeply about the fullness of your experience. Every role, every opportunity teaches you something: employment, volunteer work, contracted work. All of this builds your gifts, skills, and overall fabulosity. But you have to be intentional about extracting those lessons. Peace is strategic. It's not what you earn after achievement. It's what positions you for sustainable power and impact. Sister Zakiya is using peace to position herself in her next chapter, not waiting until she retires to fully rest. Community connections matters. Find Black-led resources, platforms, and people who understand the unique pressures we face. Google cannot replace that. When you treat self-care as strategy, boundaries as data, and rest as sacred, we lead from fullness rather than depletion, and that shift has the power to transform organizations, families, and futures. So, for your reflection this week, identify one boundary you need to reinforce, not as avoidance, but as protection. That boundary is a part of your leadership strategy. Write about it. Talk about it with someone you trust. Get honest with yourself about where you're leaking energy. Then ask, what would radical self-prioritization look like in that specific area? Not vague, I should take a better care of myself, but specific, strategic. Walk yourself through the 4 A's that Sister Zakiya shared with us. Acknowledge what actually happening. Build awareness about the cost, decide an action, and move toward acceptance. And I want to hear from you. Connect with me on social media at Revolutionary Lead and visit revolutionarylead.com. Tell me what boundaries you're setting, what self-care practices are actually working for you, and how you're protecting peace while fully leading powerfully. Sister Zakiya, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for your clinical wisdom, your lived experience navigating multiple leadership roles, and your willingness to model boundaries while being generous with your brilliance.
Well, you're more than welcome. Thank you for this platform, this critically important work, and for bringing it with your Black brilliance.
Thank you. Revolutionary leaders, remember, your stories are tomorrow's blueprint. Protect your peace so you can build your power. Be brilliant, be strategic, and be at peace. And now for my favorite part of the show. This is where women share their experience with my teachings.
Hi, my name is Mrs. Cannon, and I'm both a teacher and a parent at Deep Root Academy. Experiencing our school community in both roles gives me a unique perspective. I see the impact of this work in my classroom and at my dining table. I was drawn to the equity and fairness teachings because, as both an educator and a parent, I want children to feel seen, valued, and prepared for the world they're growing up in. What really stood out to me was the shift I saw in our students. After the teach-ins, they showed greater interest in discussions and began asking deeper and more thoughtful questions. They were more curious and more engaged. And I saw the same curiosity at home. My son came home with meaningful questions that sparked some important, really valuable conversations in our family. And that's when it really clicked for me. When these conversations happen at school in a supportive and intentional way, they don't stay in the classroom. They create ripple effects. Having these discussions within our school community made the learning feel real and actionable. Reading about equity and theory is one thing, but engaging with colleagues, parents, and students in shared dialogue made it personal. It gave us space to reflect, to listen, and to think about how we create inclusive environments every day. If I were speaking to another parent or educator, I would say that bringing equity education into schools is about preparing students to navigate an ever-changing world with empathy, confidence, and critical thinking. This work is about equipping our children with the tools they need to understand others, communicate respectfully, and move through the world thoughtfully. And when we center fairness and inclusion in our learning environments, we are modeling the kind of community we hope they will help build in the future. I'm grateful to be part of a school community that is willing to have these conversations and to continue learning together for our students and also alongside them.
Thank you for sharing your brilliance, your compassion, and your commitment to Black women, leading with power, ease, and strategy. Thank you for listening to Revolutionary Leadership. If today's conversation sparked something in you, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share this episode with another change maker in your life. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, joy, and revolution.